Hi everybody, this is the review video that I wanted you to watch, study session. And if you have your math notebook handy, could you go ahead and get it out? And if not, maybe pause the video and go get it. You should have it with you at home since you can't keep it here. And I just want to kind of walk back through what we've learned so far in this unit. So if we start at the beginning of what we learned, we talked about adding and subtracting fractions with like denominators, like meaning the same. And when the fractions have the same denominator, it's really easy to just either add the numerators or subtract the numerators. But when we're adding and subtracting fractions, we never add or subtract the denominators. The denominators go right across. So sometimes, most of the time, we have fractions that have different denominators. We can't do anything with them until we change the denominators and make it a common denominator. So this is where we have to come up with equivalent fractions. So I need to come up with a fraction that means the same amount as this, but has a different number on the bottom. So we can think of the least common multiple. So the least common multiple of 2 and 3 is 6. Or sometimes the easiest common multiple is just to multiply whatever number is on the bottom by both numbers over here, and this denominator by both numbers over here. Either way, once we make equivalent fractions, then we can either add the numerators or subtract the numerators. We keep that on our, we keep the denominator the same unless we're going to simplify. This I want to remind you because typically a very common mistake on this quiz that we're about to take is people forget to make common denominators if the fractions are unlike. So take that for a second in your head, and I would like to give you one more problem to try and solve. You can just jot this down on this page in your notebook. So take a second and solve that. Pause the video, solve it. If you haven't paused it, pause it. Okay, now, correct answer. The least common multiple of these two numbers is 30. So I've got to make 3 fifths into a fraction with 30 on the bottom. 5 times 6 is 30. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. 3 times 6 is 18 minus 6 times 5 is 30. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. 2 times 5 is 10. 18 minus 10 is 8. Number stays on the bottom there. And now that brings us perfectly into what we're going to talk about next, which is putting fractions in simplest form. So in order for a fraction to be in simplest form, it has to be that there are no common factors left between 8 and 30. Now right here, 8 and 30 are both even numbers. So right away I know it can't be in simplest form, because if you have two even numbers, then you know for sure that you can divide by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 30 divided by 2 is 15. So 4/15 would be the simplest form of this fraction. Let's mosey on over here. If when we were making an equivalent fraction, you were like, I don't remember what she was doing, this would be a page for you to review. If after when we had to go simplify and you were like, wait, what? This would be the page for you to review. So the important thing is that we're dividing by a common factor, and for the fastest path to the simplest form, we want to divide by the greatest common factor. All right, so now we went into the idea of sometimes we have more than a whole, and we can represent this in two ways. One way is we can write a mixed number where we say the number of wholes we have and the fraction in addition to those wholes. That's called a mixed number, a mix of whole numbers and fractions. Or we have an improper fraction where we say how many halves or thirds or fifths or whatever, and the top is bigger than the bottom. So if the top is bigger than the bottom, we say it's top heavy. That's an improper fraction. And one thing that you know now from being through it is you have to be able to convert between these two things easily and a lot. You need to do it when you are subtracting and potentially adding mixed numbers or fractions. You need to do it when you are multiplying mixed numbers. You need to do it when you're dividing mixed numbers. So if this is something that you're iffy on, then this should be a focus. Maybe go in the math course on Schoology, and there were those, I think there were 2 different links to practice going from improper fractions to mixed numbers and vice versa. That could be a great study technique for you. If we have something like this, like 3 2/3, it takes 3 pieces to make a whole. We have 3 wholes, so that would be 9 pieces, plus 2 more pieces gives us 11 pieces, and each piece is a third, so 11/3. So when we have a mixed number, we multiply and then add, and that gives us our numerator. If we start with an improper fraction, we have to be thinking of dividing it. If it takes 4 pieces to make a whole, 17 divided by 4 is 4 with some remainder. So I can make 4 wholes. That takes care of 16 pieces.
At this time, any student riding a first load bus may proceed to your buses.
And then I have the 1 piece left over. This is a great opportunity as a reminder to use your multiplication table. So in the case of 17/4, I can go down the 4s, go down the denominator column until I get as close as I can to 17 without going over, like the Price is Right. So 16 is as close as it can get. So this is how many wholes I could make. And that is how many pieces I would use to do that. So in 4 wholes, there would be 16 pieces used up. Then I do 17 minus 16, and I have 1 left over. So when we add and subtract these, we have to just use common sense, right? Like if I can just add the whole numbers and then add the fractions, I should do that, not forgetting about common denominators. Sometimes I might have to borrow from the whole, in which case I can turn my wholes into improper fractions and do it that way. This can be tricky for people because it's not always very straightforward. You have to use your brain. And that some people are just more comfortable when they're like, I do this and then this happens and I feel good about that. So if you are that kind of person that you just want a rule that every single time, turn your mixed numbers into improper fractions. Do what you need to do with them, and then turn them back around at the end. So if you're a rule follower and you like to have that, there's your rule. Let's do one of these for practice. 6 1/5 minus 10/11. Pause. I'll go over in a second.
All students being picked up by parents and all student athletes are now dismissed.
So first of all, I have to make these have common denominators. 55 is going to be my common denominator. 5 times what is 55? 5 times 11 is 55. So 1 times 11 is 11. 11 times 5 is 55. So 10 times 5 is 50. Now I notice right away that 11 55ths, it's hard to take away 50 55ths. So I'm going to steal from my whole number. So now I'm going to add 55 more until this is 66, because 55 plus 11. And then I get 16 55ths, and don't forget about your 5 wholes. So 5 and 16 55ths. Ooh, that ended up being a harder one than I was expecting. And 16 and 55 don't have any common factors. All right. Moving forward from here, now we're really into all of that so far was 6 weeks of your life last year, and I just covered it in like 6 minutes. So we're moving into now like the 6th grade learning. So fractions of fractions, we know that in math, the word of tells us it's a multiplication problem. And multiplying fractions, man, way easier than adding and subtracting them. I just multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. And that's my answer. I just have to check for common factors to make them into simplest form. What about mixed numbers? If I'm given a mixed number, I just make it an improper fraction and then straight up multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. This should be, like, we've drilled this so many times, I'm not going to spend too much time on it because you can go back and watch the video if you are struggling with it. Dividing fractions, we know, is really not hard. We just have to remember what to do with it. So here we kind of looked at a conceptual idea of how to divide, but what we really are going to do is we're going to find the reciprocal of the second number. So for example, in this problem, 3/8 divided by 4/10, the reciprocal of the second number is flipping it upside down. So the reciprocal is 10 over 4. And up here we talked about how do you find like the reciprocal of a whole number. So the reciprocal of a whole number is just 1 over the number. Reciprocal of 6 is, you're supposed to be saying it into your camera right now. Reciprocal of 2. Reciprocal of 2/3. Okay, so whenever we have a division problem, we don't divide. We keep the first number, we change the sign, and we flip to the reciprocal. So keep, change, flip. And then once it becomes a multiplication problem, we're back to what we did the last page that you guys are rock stars at. Straight across the top, straight across the bottom, look for common factors. A common mistake that I've seen is that when we make something that was a mixed number, we have to make it improper before we can divide. That you guys are great at. But sometimes you forget that, like, if this was the one you had to make into an improper fraction, you still have to flip it. So there can be a lot of steps there. So this would be a good one to do a practice on. 3 1/4 divided by 2 2/5. So this is where it helps to write out each step of the problem so I can kind of track my logic. So first first of all, you try to solve this. Pause the video and then unpause when you're ready. Okay, this is for people who tried to solve it. If you were cheating, better do it. All right. So this becomes 13/4 divided by 12/5. Then I keep, change the sign, and flip the second number. Now straight across the top, that's 65. 65 over 48. No, well, I know I can make one whole number. 65 pieces, I used 48 pieces. 17/48. Weird number, but that's what it turned out to be. All right, and the last thing we learned about is our simplifying hack, looking at a problem and trying to head off some of the simplification by doing it at the beginning rather than waiting till the end. So for example, if I had the problem 1/5 divided by 2 1/2. First, I'm going to rewrite the problem with my mixed number as an improper fraction. So that's going to be 5/2. Son of a gun, I did it again! Okay, let's just pretend that was times. 1/5 times 2 1/2. I rewrite this as 1/5 times 5/2. Right now I see where there is a common factor on the top and the bottom. If there's on the top and the bottom, I can cross it out. It cancels out because it's like doing 5 divided by 5 is 1 and 5 divided by 5 is 1. So my answer is just 1/2. Again, that's one of those don't get lost through the woods kind of a thing. All right, this brings us to the end of our study session together. After you've watched this, I would say it's a wise idea to practice for your quiz for tomorrow. either maybe with a game on one of the games on Schoology, doing some of your old pages, rewatching a video that you need more detail on. It is up to you what you do, but I do hope you take this opportunity to build your brain power. And I'll see you tomorrow.